I'm not sure about you, but there are some times when I look out or look around our world today and I see all of the evil that is going on, it becomes overwhelming. It's exhausting to see all of the evil. It's depressing to see all of the evil that is going on in our community and throughout our nation and ultimately even all around the world. And it's everywhere. I mean, we all heard of and saw on the news and social media what happened in New Orleans just a few weeks ago, where a man drove his car into a crowd of people and began to open fire, intentionally trying to kill as many innocent people as he could. It's just pure evil. It's depressing. We all know a little over a year ago when Hamas invaded Israel and killed 1,200 innocent people and took over 200 people hostage, leaving them in absolutely deplorable conditions and abusing them in probably horrific ways that we're not even aware of even already or right now. Again, just pure evil. A few years ago, many of us saw a movie based on a true story titled The Sound of Freedom, and we were either made aware of or reminded of the problem of human trafficking in our world. That there are people that are being sold and trafficked into slavery and into the sex trade, and how people are abused in appalling ways in these situations. Sometimes they're even kids, which I think most of us, when we hear or see those kinds of things, it can really make us even like literally sick to our stomachs to know that kind of thing is going on. So much horrific evil that when we see it around our world, it does grab our attention. We hate to hear about and see those kinds of things. But then there's other evils that go on in our world today that have just kind of become normalized. Things that are just as evil, but they've just kind of become normal part of our culture. You heard Lauren talking about one of those. I mean, the innocent killing of babies, murdering children is not okay. That's evil. But it's become normalized. It's part of what just people do in our world. We see people addicted to pornography, but it's become so normalized in our culture. But when you think and see the degrading of men and women, the abuse that takes place, the way children are abused in some of these situations, then it's just horrifying to see what's ultimately going on behind the scenes. Satan, of course, is behind it all. He's actively involved in our world, trying to attack and destroy people's lives, the culture that we live in. He's involved in the abuse and addiction of alcohol and illegal drugs and prescription drugs and who knows how many other substances he's trying to destroy. He's trying to control and keep people in bondage to these things, all the while convincing them that that's what they need to numb the evil that's happened to them in their past. It's a trick, it's a ploy, it's evil. So normal, though, in our culture. With all those kind of things going on, let's also not downplay how Satan also is at work through bullies today. He's involved in that work with our kids and teenagers and even adults who are being victimized by bullies who seek to control other people's lives, to use them in some way and to just keep them walking in fear. It's evil. It's part of Satan and his work in this world. All around us. He's destroying people's lives around the world and sometimes even in our own circles, in our own families, in our own neighborhoods, in our own schools, in the places that we work. And with so much evil in our world and the depths of it being so strong and deep sometimes, I mean, I think the question we ask, is there anything that we can do about it? I mean, is there really anything that we can do? It's so dark, and Satan just keeps seeming to be winning all of the time. We've been in this message series titled Life Expressed over the last several weeks. We've been looking at how Jesus expresses his life through us to make impact on others in the world. The answer to that question about can we really do anything about the evil in the world is no. No, you can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it, but Jesus can, and he can do that in and through us. The more we become aware of the way Jesus lived his life that we see in the Gospels and that we've been looking at in the Gospel of Luke specifically, the more we'll be aware of how he's actively involved in our lives to work through us to make impact in the world. And today, we're going to see Jesus pushing back the darkness. One of the ways that he dealt with evil in his day, and then we'll talk about how that might apply to us today, the way he continues to do that, and the way he works through us to do those very things. I asked you to turn to Luke chapter 4, verse 31. This is what Luke begins to say. Then he, referring to Jesus, went down to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and on the Sabbath, he taught the people. You may remember last week in the previous section we were in that Jesus was teaching in a synagogue as well. It was in a different place. He was in his hometown of Nazareth. But you may even remember that last week in the section we looked at when he was teaching those people in the synagogue that he unrolled the scroll of Isaiah and he rolled to a spot where it was talking about the Messiah who would come, and he began to read about how the Messiah would proclaim good news to the poor, how he would proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, how he would set the oppressed free and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And you may remember that he rolled up the scroll and he said, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Again, Jesus is saying, it's me. I'm the Messiah, and this is what I've come to do. This is my purpose, my messianic purpose, the things that I will be about and what I'll be doing. And here in Luke chapter 4, verse 31, Luke is now beginning to tell us how he left Nazareth to go out and begin to do those things that he just announced he said he was here to do. And we're going to see him doing one of those things in just a moment. When he gets to Capernaum, we're told that he goes into another synagogue there, a meeting place of people, and that he began to teach in that setting the way he taught in Nazareth. Let's look and see how they react to his teaching in verse 32. Luke says those who were in the synagogue, were amazed at his teaching. Why? Because his words had authority. Underline that word authority if you're following along in your own Bible. This was so different than the way they had been used to hearing other rabbis and other teachers teach. Most rabbis in this particular day would bring out some kind of a problem, and then they would just simply tell you what every other rabbi and teacher had to say about that problem. They would never solve the problem. They would just tell you what everybody else said about it, and they move on to the next one and tell you what all the other rabbis said about that problem, and then just go on and on and on, and here's what everybody said. But Jesus was different. He didn't take the time when he was teaching to go, well, Rabbi so-and-so taught this, and Rabbi so-and-so taught this. He just said, this is the truth. Take it or leave it. His words were sufficient. He taught with authority. And people just weren't used to that. Aren't you going to tell us what everybody else thinks? It doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. I am the truth. I am the authority on these things. They were amazed by that kind of teaching. Had their attention. But while Jesus was teaching and they were amazed at his teaching, he was about to be interrupted. Luke says in verse 33 in the synagogue that there was a man who was possessed by a demon, an impure spirit. A couple of things to just note before we see what happens here. Number one, he's recognizing the presence of evil. He's claiming that there was a demon present. Demons are real. Evil is real, despite what other people might try to tell you. They existed in the world, they continue to exist in the world, and they have influence and impact over people, and we see this one doing it with this guy. He was possessing him. He was claiming his authority over him. So guess what you have now? You have Jesus who's in the synagogue, and Luke just tells us that he's teaching with what? Authority. And now you have a demon who's also present in the synagogue, who is also exercising authority. Sounds like a battle. One authority against another authority. I mean, if this was a movie, this is where the dramatic, climactic music would begin to play, right? You've got Jesus, who's the essence of good, moral, and right, and teaching with this authority. And you've got this demon who's impure and evil and immoral, who's exercising his authority. Who's going to win? It's going to be a fight for the ages, a fight to the death. Punches are going to be thrown. Blood will surface. There's going to be sweat, effort, intensity. There's no way to know who could win. Could go either way. This is the scene, he's saying, right? Jesus teaching authority, demon authority. It's going to happen. He, the demon, cried out at the top of his voice. Verse 34, "Go away. What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Doesn't sound too much like the trash talk you would expect out of a demon with authority, does it? He says, "Go away!" You don't tell people to go away unless you're what? Scared. You're feeling threatened by them. He's feeling threatened by Jesus and the authority that he has. He doesn't want to fight. Like, just go away, you meanie. Like, I know who's really in charge here, right? Notice that he knows who Jesus is. He calls him Jesus of Nazareth, the Holy One of God. He knows his power. He knows his authority. He even asks the question, Are you here to destroy us? Is it that time? He knows that Jesus is the ultimate authority over him, that this is not going to be a fair fight. There's really nothing that he can do about the situation that he's in. So much for this cosmic battle. I mean, quite honestly, sounds like demons, bullies, become wimps in the presence of Jesus. They're all big and bad and possessing people and doing these things to them, and Jesus walks in the room and like, just go away. Right? I mean, I hope that's the first thing that just stands out to you here. Sometimes we get so overwhelmed and it's dark and they're just so in control, and is there anything that we can do? And what about the demons in my own life and the things that I'm struggling and wrestling with? I just can't seem to get any victory. And Jesus shows up and the demon starts whimpering and whining. And if Jesus dwells in you, then guess what? When the demons show up, they start whimpering and whining because the presence of Jesus, who dwells in you, has entered the room. So scared. You here to destroy us? Doesn't that help you approach the things that you've been wrestling with and that Satan has convinced you have no power and control, and the things going on in our world? It helps us to see it from a different perspective, the truth. It's demons whimpering and whining, and of course with good reason. Look what happens in verse 35. "Be quiet," Jesus said sternly. "Come out of him." Then the demon threw the man down before them all and came out without injuring him. No punches thrown, no leg kicks, no wrestling on the ground, no sweating, no real effort, just words. The same authoritative words that people were amazed by in his teaching. He says, "Be quiet," and the demon comes out of him. Now, not before trying to make one last attempt, one last ditch effort to at least hurt the man. It's like we're told that the demon threw him down. He's like saying, "Okay, you may be able to destroy me, Jesus, but I'm taking this guy out on my way down." Jesus is like, "No, I don't even think you're going to do that. You're going to throw him down, but I'm going to keep the guy from being injured." And that's what happens. Jesus wasn't just interested in showing off his power. He was concerned for the man who was being held captive by evil in the world. Jesus saw the evil in the world, and he did something about the evil that was in the world. And he'll do something about the evil in the world today. He'll do it through you. When you cast out a demon with just mere words, and there's no real showdown in that way, it usually has the tendency, I would think, to get people's attention. And that's what Luke tells us happened next, verse 36. All the people were amazed and said to each other, "What words are these?" With authority and power, underline those words again, authority, power, he gives orders to impure spirits, and they come out. And the news about him spread throughout the surrounding area. I bet it did. It's real power, real authority. People were witnessing it firsthand. No epic battle between evil and good. It was over in the amount of time it took him to say 6 words. What we see is that Jesus is the ultimate power. He is the ultimate authority over all things, including evil. And Jesus came to set people free from evil, to proclaim freedom for the imprisoned, to set the oppressed free, to push back the darkness and the forces of evil in this world. And again, if this is what Jesus does, and Jesus puts his life in you to express his life through you, then he will do the same to push back the darkness and fight evil in our world today. Now, before you go out trying to cast out demons out of someone, let me remind you that evil exists in our world in a number of ways. And there's a number of ways that Jesus dwelling in us, who is pushing back the darkness in this world, fights evil through us. He did it through William. You know William, right? William came to faith in Christ when he was 25 years old. He called his conversion the Great Change and immediately thought that he should get out of politics and go into full-time vocational ministry. He was praying about that. He was thinking about that, contemplating that, when a pastor pulled him aside and said, "William, I believe that the Lord has raised you up for the good of our nation and that you should actually stay where you are at. Don't get into full-time vocational ministry. Jesus wants to express his life through you, even in the political realm where you're at right now." And the thing is, William Wilberforce did stay in politics after coming to know Christ, and Jesus began to express his life through him and used him to fight the evil of slavery in England. As a matter of fact, Jesus used William almost single-handedly to abolish the slave trade in the 1700s in England. And when it was finally abolished, John Pollock, his biographer, said it was the greatest moral achievement of the British people. Historian G.M. Trevelyan called it one of the turning events in the history of the world. Guys, William Wilberforce didn't do that. Jesus did that in and through William as William. William was just the instrument. Jesus is expressing his life in and through believers today to push back evil in our world, and he used William as his instrument to fight the evil of slavery during his time. What's he looking to do through you? Gary Haugen was a human rights attorney in the United States. He began to work in other parts of the world, really impoverished parts of the world. And he began to see how children, women, men in poverty-stricken areas were being trafficked. He began to notice how they were being sold into slavery, how they were being exploited and abused every day because evil people in power preyed over them. P-R-E-Y-E-D, prayed over them, on them, and their vulnerabilities that poverty creates. When he saw those things, Jesus grabbed a hold of his heart. He knew that this was not okay, that these were people who were born in the image of God, and they were being oppressed and abused by evil people. When he began to talk to other people about this thing, people began to tell Gary, that's just the way things are. There's nothing that you can really do about that, especially in those parts of the world. Their local justice systems just aren't equipped to defend these people, and there was nothing. They just give up on it. There's nothing you can do. But Jesus puts his life in us to express his life through us to fight evil in this world. And he led Gary to start the International Justice Mission, which seeks to protect women and children from domestic and sexual violence. They work to free people from sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and they help to fight the online sexual exploitation of children. Last year, over 10,000 children, women, and men were relieved from violence. 243 survivors were restored to safety, stability, and strength. Over 3,000 perpetrators of violence were restrained. 22,000 justice system officials were trained to better protect their communities from violence. And 1,400 traffickers and abusers were convicted in local courts. And that's just last year. They've been doing it for 25 years. Gary, don't worry about that. There's nothing you can do. It's just the way it is in these parts of the world. Apparently, they didn't know that Jesus cast out demons with just words. Apparently, they didn't know that that same Jesus dwells in the church today, and he expresses his life through the church today to push back the darkness and fight evil, even in places like that. I think they do now. You heard Lauren talking about Beverly Klein. She's somebody right here in our own community, just serving, paying attention to what's going on, and all of a sudden someone who's pregnant, a teenage girl and struggling, needs help. What do? Well, I try to get her help. And as she tries to get her help, she's pointed to how these things are influencing girls and trying to lead them to get abortions and all of these kind of things. And God grabs a hold of her heart and says, that is not okay. But what am I going to do? I'm just one person. I'm not really equipped. I don't have a big nonprofit ministry that can run these things. Well, Jesus, I'm available. I've got an apartment. Oh, you want me to serve them and just open up this place? Okay, I'll take one step in that direction as I watch you work in and through me. And then the next step and the next step. And now Lauren's here talking, what she said, 40 years later, and all the different ministries that's led to. Can you imagine the number of women who have been impacted through that? The kids who have been adopted, and the light that's been shined, the hope that's been brought into these worlds. Why? Because Jesus is in the business of pushing back the darkness and fighting evil in this world today, even in our own community, and he does it through instruments in the church who are available to his work in and through them. And so if he does it through them, what does that look like for you? How is Jesus expressing his life through you to fight evil in this world? Maybe it's to be more involved with one of these ministries, living alternatives or some other way, to give financially or to be available to volunteer practically in some way. Or maybe he's leading you to stand up to bullies for someone at your school or on your team or in your workplace or somewhere else. Maybe he's leading you to help someone who's fighting the evil of pornography or addiction to alcohol or drugs. I don't know what it is for you, but there could be a number of ways that Jesus fights evil and pushes back the darkness in and through you, because you're unique and because there's so much evil in our world today in a number of different forms. So I'm not going to stand up here and tell you exactly what that is for you, but I do believe this. The more you're looking for it, the more you're asking for him, how he's working in and through you, the more I think you'll begin to see him break your heart for evil, certain evils in this world, and you'll be saying things like, that's not okay. I can't not get involved with that and continue to let that happen. And so I'm available. Use me. And the more each of us have that posture of recognizing that this is the activity and the work that Jesus is still doing today, and that he's doing it in and through us as us, the more we'll faithfully step into and begin to participate with him in those areas. And that's my prayer, that we would be a church who's looking for how he wants to use us here in our community and around the world to push back the darkness. Jesus, when we see the evil that's going on in our world, sometimes it is so overwhelming. For some of us, it's overwhelming in our own lives. We're experiencing the struggle and the battle. It's hard. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for helping us see how Jesus cast out demons with mere words. How demons become wimps in the presence of Jesus. May we renew our minds to that perspective of things when we're struggling in our own lives. The victory that we have in Christ. May you break our hearts for the evil that takes place in our world. Show us how you want to use us to push back the darkness, to fight that evil. We're available. We're your instruments. Work in us and through us. In Jesus' name.